Welcome to a special bonus episode of Cinemaholics. That's right, we love giving you bonus shows because bonus shows mean bonus reviews. Because, well, there's a new movie coming out this weekend, and I know everyone's talking about Super Mario Brothers, the Super Mario Brothers movie this, the Super Mario Brothers movie that. There's another movie, though, hitting theaters April 5th that is kind of the counter-programming. And we're going to talk about it now, a little bit ahead of time, because we both have seen it. I'm, of course, John Negroni from the internet, San Francisco Bay Area, whatever. And he's Will Ashton from Who Knows, Who Cares?
Hey, we're talking bonuses, I guess. Where's my bonus?
Your bonus? You got a Christmas bonus, remember? I gave it to you, and you said, I will forget this, and not, if I bring it up again, pretend that, yeah?
I don't know. We need to talk business, I guess.
We need to renegotiate the terms of our deal.
Yeah, I'll put it all on the line right now.
Will Ashton, Ben Affleck is back.
Yeah.
Ben's back. Ben is
Call Julia Roberts and Lucas Hedges, because Ben is back.
Yeah, exactly. He's directed a few films. He's directed this new one, which he co-stars in. Really, the movie belongs to Matt Damon.
Yep.
Right, so
this is
the main character.
The first movie that Ben directed that stars his good buddy Matt Damon.
That is true. That is true. So he's directed films like Argo, Town, Live by Night. What am I forgetting? There's another one.
Gone Baby Gone.
Gone Baby Gone.
Best one, in my opinion.
In your opinion, that's the best one, huh?
Probably, yeah. What's your?
I'd pick the Town.
Town second best, I think.
I really like that one. Great Jeremy Renner performance.
Oh yeah.
I gotta say, I don't love Argo, and but I'm not gonna
Argo something yourself.
Argo yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
The movie was fake, Will, but the mission was real.
I don't know. I will say, like, at the time, Argo, I feel like was getting kind of overhyped. Like, I think it's like a good movie, not a great one. I feel like a lot of the praise was also thrown to the script, which I like, but people were acting like it was like one of the best scripts ever. And I was like, yeah, it's like a solid film. But I will say those last like 30, 40 minutes are extremely well directed. Like, just,
they're very tense.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's a good way to pivot into Air, because one thing that I think Affleck does quite well is he's good at picking cinematographers. For this one, he picked a cinematographer who's done movies for Tarantino,
for
Scorsese. That's Robert Richardson.
One of the
I think without Richardson's work here, I think that this movie wouldn't be nearly as like impressive as it is overall, because it the way it's shot, at least.
I was a little confused because I know I saw that credit at the beginning, and I was a little surprised throughout the movie that was him. Like, it's not the cinematography is bad. Like, everything about the movie, without saying too much about it ahead of time, is competently done. But I never really got the sense like, oh, I'm watching like one of our best cinematographers at work here. In the same way that I did.
It's more of like he's elevating humble material. So he's making like the mundane like kind of move well. It's like a different plus of cinematography besides like, okay, yeah, it's not Blade Runner 2049. But the sense of place, the sense of location, yeah, I think that's all good.
I mean, just compared to like his previous film, which I believe was Emancipation. Now that's a film where I'm like, was the color grading team trying to like sabotage his career? Because like, what's going on here? Like this, I couldn't believe that was Robert Richardson. This one was more like, okay, like it's nicely done. Like I can tell a sharp cinematographer is on board. I just never got the sense that like I was watching one of our masters outside of like a few like handsomely made shots. Like all the stuff with like the spinning camera, like when one person's in one place and another person stands there and they're now in a circle and the camera's circling around them. And I'm just like, this is money, baby. This is poetry in motion.
And yeah, so it's just, I just think it's great that Affleck was able to get him again. They've worked together one time before, and good collaboration there. So he co-writes this movie with Ben Affleck, but also Jason Bateman, Marlon Wayans, Chris Messina, Chris Tucker, and Viola Davis. They all wrote them. I'm just joking. Well,
I was gonna say because
I was written
surprised.
by Alex Convery.
Right. I initially thought when the movie was announced, it was going to be like their third writing collaboration together.
That's
after
what I thought too. Yeah.
After
so the reason I joked though that everybody wrote this movie is I do get the feeling that like without getting too far ahead, like every performer kind of like wrote their own lines. It feels like to me, but we'll get to that.
I never really got that vibe. I mean, the only actor maybe I got that sense from was Chris Tucker, but
definitely Chris Tucker.
I didn't get that from other actors in the film.
Maybe I'm embellishing a little bit. I'm trying to have a little bit of fun on a Thursday. Who knows? But okay. So Air takes place in 1984. This is a movie. It's one of those movies about something that's not that consequential in the grand scheme of things. Like, it's a neat little story about something bigger, like on the horizon, right? So it's the story of how Nike tried to sell Michael Jordan over to like a sponsorship deal with them. The twist being it's 1984, so this is right before Michael Jordan's first season with the Chicago Bulls. Now, we all know the Air Jordan exists. That's the most famous, most popular sneaker of all time. And this movie kind of has that sort of like approach. Like, we know, you know, you're not going to watch this movie and be like, is Michael Jordan going to sign with Nike? You know, like, yeah. But it's more sort of about how that happened and sort of the big, you know, the overwhelming odds against that happening. So it's kind of framing Nike, which was more of an underdog, this movie posits, in the early 80s. So before the Air Jordan, before a lot of big things that happened with Nike, good and bad, at least that we're aware of, right? And before it became the behemoth it was actually trailing when it came to Converse and Adidas especially. Michael Jordan wanted to sign with Adidas. It's an interesting movie in the way that it takes this Nike, which it's hard to think of Nike as like any kind of underdog, right? But it's like, well, you know, our main character here is Matt Damon, who kind of has to bet his entire career, his job, his livelihood, everything on this big gamble of, you know, we can't afford, it's like the Moneyball setup. Well, like we can't afford like the players we really want, so we're going to go all in on like unconventional choices.
Yeah, I mean, the Moneyball comparison works for a number of reasons, but mainly in this sense because like it's taking that traditional sports underdog story and applying it to like this business institution that has to kind of like go against the odds and like win the championship in this sense, like in the way that you know, we expect from normal sports movies, including The Way Back, which was Ben Affleck's one of the more recent Ben Affleck starring roles, which he was quite good in. Yeah, so I think that's what makes it kind of fun and maybe sort of endearing in a way that you almost feel sort of bad for liking in some respects, because it's like, I mean, I don't know if I want to necessarily root for Nike in the like grand scheme of things, but I want to root for Matt Damon because I like this character, I like this actor, I like this guy.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
They kind of frame it too of like the whole Phil Knight thing, and you know, it's interesting because like the movie kind of pays lip service a little bit to the sort of like the downsides of business and how crummy it is, but it kind of also puts Nike above that in a weird way. But I mean, that's kind of what this movie needs to do in order for, because it doesn't want to like overcomplicate the story. And I don't know, I've seen a lot of people look at this movie and be like, oh, this is just like overhyping capitalism and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, like you can look at it that way if you want. Sure. But I do think that there is an interesting, like, you know, if you really break it down, like what is capitalistic? It's, you know, a systemic, like, you know, preying upon the people who don't really own part of the business. But this movie does have a little bit of some story to the idea of like the players having some stake, having some like, you know, the revenue sharing being part of the negotiations, and how that, you know, ultimately I think it's capitalistic, but it's less capitalistic when the people who are like benefiting from certain things or putting their labor in are getting, you know, rewarded for that in a way that isn't like brazenly greedy of like only one person gets everything, if that makes sense. So that was just like a criticism. Like, yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes people just get a little bit too of like, oh, movie shows capitalism, therefore bad, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, especially nowadays, for sure. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're necessarily fans of capitalism in the broad sense. But I mean, I will say it's more about like fighting the bureaucracy in capitalism, I guess, here, and like kind of like proving your stake in the game in the grand scheme of, you know, this wide net thing that obviously, like you said, like in the broad scheme of things, I don't know if this necessarily affects my life day to day. I don't have Air Jordans. Like Michael Jordan doesn't affect my life in the broad sense, but like it is about like kind of like courting this legend and like the footsteps, as it were, to build Michael Jordan as we know him today. Because obviously the Air Jordan was crucial to him building his fame and his legacy as we know it now. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the filmmakers are very smart about how they kind of toe that line where it's like, I mean, it is fair to call it a commercial for Nike. Like, it's not that, but I think they're self-aware enough to like acknowledge that, put that in the framework of the narrative so that people, can't like, I mean, even when the movie gets called out for it, like the movie's also calling itself out for it, but also working well within that framework enough that hits the beats that you want from a traditional dad movie such as this one.
Yeah. Commercials can be entertaining too, including, a story, like a little bit of like a Nike PR sort of like elevated puff piece that happens to be distributed by Amazon. It is kind of interesting how movies just, exist like that now.
Sure.
We're kind of in a weird time.
I mean, I think maybe inspired by that, Amazon's kind of taking a gamble and putting this into theaters in like a wide release. Now, granted, this is like a $90 million production. So, I mean, I don't know what other alternatives they could have other than eating that cost and hoping people watch on their service. But
we don't know the exact budget. The official figures are eluding us, but it's supposed to be somewhere between 70 and 90 million. It might be a little bit less than 90 million. So,
right. But yeah, I mean, they're also kind of taking a risk and trying to like stake their claim in a broad sense. And I feel like there's a weird sort of, mixed feeling I have about that, where it's like, on the one hand, I don't know how much I want to root for Amazon as far as like they're this global empire that's going to probably take over our lives and how we live it for the next few years to come. But also, I'm kind of like, if they're going to release movies like this in theaters nationwide as counter programming to something like Super Mario Brothers, like, yeah, I want to see more movies like this. I want to support movies like this. Obviously, really like Ben Affleck, and I want to support him making movies like this. But yeah, I also feel kind of weird, like rooting for a movie like this to succeed, because it means Amazon's going to get more money than they already have, which is like more than God. So yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, if you really look to like the history of film has always had robber barons and monopolies and gritty studios ripping people off. I guess I'm more of sort of like it's our reality, and what I say has very little bearing, but I of course want to have my own integrity and say what I believe about certain things. But I never really like look at this stuff as like there's something I can really effectively change about the way movies are made, and I can just advocate for what I want to see. I know you and many other people have said like we need more movies like this that are like you just said, a movie that's kind of not the four quadrant. It's not trying to be like for everybody. It's the kind of movie that like if a kid watches it, it's because their dad really likes it and they want their dad to think they're older,
sure.
A big kid.
I mean, yeah,
this is the kind of thing I would watch with my parents. Yeah.
Right. I mean, dads have like 3 major movies this year. They got Error, they got Oppenheimer, and then they got the new Indiana Jones. So, I mean, in that sense, I guess they're thriving. But I mean, those are only a select few movies in the broad scheme of the movie market.
Right. And that's why I think that it's kind of interesting to me that we don't get, because I made this comment on Twitter where I was like, well, if Hollywood, it's interesting that they don't make movies that often that are sort of like about this, like this kind of like process, or like people doing their jobs within the sports context. And a few people, one person responded, was just like, oh, well, there's Tetris, and there's this. And I was just like, Tetris is not that kind of movie. Tetris is more of sort of like a heightened kind of like Cold War thriller that's about sort of the origin of Tetris going on. Like it has like a similar framework, but I wouldn't compare Tetris, for example, to Moneyball, because we're really talking more about that underdog sports story that is like wrapped onto the business around it. A closer comparison, I guess, would be High Flying Bird. Why is High Flying Bird so fun to watch? Because it's really fun to watch like people who are good at their jobs, like trying to navigate seemingly impossible odds just through rhetoric and like taking risks and being daring.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair comparison, though. Again, I think with Moneyball, the comparison's more fit because it's like ostensibly Moneyball is like an anti-baseball movie in a sense that like it's taking characters who are like find the antithesis of what makes baseball special and like using that against the sport, which like in theory I should be rooting against. But that movie is just so well made and so rousing and endearing and just like incredible filmmaking that it's just like, yeah, I'm rooting for him, even though in theory I shouldn't. And I feel like that's kind of like what's happening here too in some respects.
It's interesting, yeah, because like in that sense, it's like, well, what is the most valuable thing about the sport? It's like it's kind of a comparison between like real talent of like being the best, but also art, and I think that's why it's a good idea that they had Ben Affleck direct this movie and be part of it, because he is, I think, and people are going to like throw things at me, but he's an artist. Like, I think that he's making this movie not to like make a bunch of money and be on Nike's great side. I think that he's just genuinely wanted to make a really cool movie about a story he finds interesting. And I think that comes through.
And I mean, like, Ben Affleck is such a fascinating figure to me. I feel like because he is someone who, like, I think the reason why Ben Affleck is quote unquote Ben Affleck is because, like, he seemingly has it all. Like, he's good looking, he's talented, he has that movie star charisma, he's smart.
He's got that edge, you know.
He's got that
people
edge.
Look at him and they're like, I could fix him, you know.
Right.
He's
but he also he's like broken. He's been humbled a lot. And, you know, he had like kind of a cocky ego at one point, but then like life threw him a number of curveballs. He has his own addictions to deal with and all this stuff. And I think rather than
daredevil, you know,
right, rather than like let that define him, I think he's constantly kind of had like this up and down saga where it's just like he's been self-aware enough to kind of acknowledge his flaws and move past them, but also kind of gets caught up in those flaws again and again. So it's like he's constantly on the down and up. And I feel like that in some respects had to inform the story in some way as a director.
100%. You know what? And by the way, you know what was the last movie that Amazon released in theaters without simultaneously putting on their service?
Manchester by the Sea?
It was not that long ago. It was not 7 years ago. It was a movie that came out. It was in 2019. I don't know if you'll remember it. I mean, you'll remember when I say, but
right. I may just not remember that this is an Amazon film. I don't know.
It's Late Night. The Mindy Kaling.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that was Amazon. So yeah. I also kind of forgot about that.
Well, it was Sundance at first, and then but
didn't they spend like $20 million or something on that?
I don't remember how much, but definitely a lot. And
it did not make that.
Hence, they have not done this in a while, especially because of COVID too, you know. But yeah, that movie made, I'm looking at it here, $22 million. But I mean, low budget, so like $9 million budget. Right. I'm kind of like glancing. I don't see how much they paid for it. Oh, they're saying their marketing budget was roughly $35 million. So,
I remember, they put a lot. Yes. They were really expecting a lot of things from that movie, and it did not get a wide audience.
People expect a lot of things from Mindy Kaling, and you know, they can do that if they want. I'm not going to stop him.
Yeah, this isn't the dissing Mindy Kaling hour. We're here talking about my man Ben Affleck.
Well, we talked about Ben a bit. So Matt Damon really is like the lead here, and it is. I know I keep bringing up Moneyball, but it is kind of similar to Moneyball in the sense that you know he's a character who I think part of the reason you root for him is because he has so much to lose. Like the movie's pretty good at delivering like really like how fraught this character's like life kind of is. We see him like early on like gambling and losing and just having issues in terms of like kind of being over the hill. You know, he's a little bit overweight. He kind of feels like he's not valued at Nike. Like he kind of has a weird job. He doesn't have a secretary. He's just kind of, you know, it seems like he only really works there because he has this friendship with the Phil Knight character played by Ben Affleck. And you can kind of sense that everyone's a little bit like, why are you here? Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I'll just say real quick, like such great use of Ben and Matt's like, you know, instant chemistry and just like the history that they had together where it's just like, you know, like we don't really get to see a lot of like what their friendship is, but just because we know those actors and the history between them, they're able to sell like, okay, like obviously a lot's happened between these two and they've kind of had each other's backs throughout all this time. And yeah, I think that's really...
It mirrors real life so well.
Right. I think it's really good use of their chemistry.
Yeah, because his job is a little bit more, it's not flashy. He mainly just goes to like basketball, like high school tournaments, and you know, he scouts, you know, he's like, oh, here are the players I think you should do. They literally have a scene that's like right out of Moneyball where they're all sitting in the boardroom, they're all trying to figure out like, who are we going to get? What are we going to do? And he's the one who's just sort of like, you guys are dumb, but I'm smart and I'm willing to take a shot that you guys didn't see coming. And then,
Yeah, I mean, that's the scene for me, like where the movie kind of like clicks into place. Because at the beginning of it, I was a little kind of like, I don't know. I'm not really like seeing what people are seeing.
The 80s montage was so unnecessary. It's like, we know the 80s exists. Thanks.
Yeah. And then like Jason Bateman, like every line of dialogue he has in like the first 10 minutes of this movie is like an 80s reference. And it's just like, calm down, guy. Like,
I don't know. Yeah, it's like you're acting like a real Super Mario. I'm like,
right.
what
And then
year is
also the soundtrack at this point is just constant 80s needle drops and that's throughout the film, I should say. But I mean, like, they really lay it on thick at the beginning of this movie.
I've been hurting for a movie that weaves its soundtrack in a little bit better. Air is not that movie.
No.
For a lot of it, but it's better than I'd say it's about as good as Tetris, which is like okay.
Okay.
And it's way better than Super Mario. Super Mario is like the orchestral music, and Super Mario is fantastic. But like the needle drops are just it reminds me of like how mad people got at Cruella for those needle drops. It's pretty similar.
I haven't seen the new Mario yet, but I'll take your word for it. I'll see it soon.
You will. And okay, but back to Air. We don't have really like it's a Michael Jordan movie without Michael Jordan, right? Like there's just like an actor who kind of you see like the back of his head. I think it was Alonso Duralde. He said it reminds him of like it's like Ben-Hur, where like Michael Jordan is Jesus, and so like you never, not really about Jesus, but it's it's Ben-Hur. It's about Ben-Hur. So I think it's pretty fitting.
I mean, I thought that was a pretty smart choice on their part. It's a little weird at times. Like whenever you like see him in different board meetings and we just don't see Michael, it's a little odd. But I do think like any young actor, I mean, who is like probably going to get this as like their first major role and has to play the Michael Jordan, I feel is just going to be set up to lose. And
the only person who could even come close to understanding how it feels would be Michael B. Jordan.
Right.
But, he's too old
but
at this
also,
point.
It also kind of helps to sell the idea of like Michael isn't just Michael. He's like this idea that's going to be bigger than larger than life. So like the idea that it's
really his parents shepherding him in, and that's why they focus so much on the Viola Davis character.
Yeah. And I mean, we do see like archival footage of Michael Jordan. No archival footage of Space Jam, though. I did notice, but
they skipped over that a little bit to see how it is.
During that
your roots.
Yeah. I mean, without giving away the context of it, there's like a big like life montage of Michael Jordan towards like a climactic boardroom meeting.
It's literally like a Mad Men scene.
Sure.
Basically.
Yeah.
Like the whole pitch thing is straight out of Mad Men. You can tell.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I thought a lot about Mad Men watching this movie, and I feel like it's kind of fitting because like I've been watching Mad Men on Amazon, and it kind of informed that like I feel like this movie, and I'll get more into that, like the streamingness of it later. But I'll say as far as that scene is concerned, I just kept waiting in that montage to be like, are they going to show it? Are they going to show like
they're going to do it? They're going to
Michael Jordan getting kissed by Bugs Bunny? Are they going to show the scene where Michael Jordan becomes a basketball and he's like bounced on the court and thrown into the net? Are they just going to like show some?
Are they going to pull a Babylon and just like skip right over it?
No, I was genuinely curious, and obviously we don't see any clips from it, and I was initially kind of peeved by it, but then I took a moment to collect myself, and I realized, they're saving that for the sequel, Jam.
Wow. Okay. Well, I was actually about to mention that I think this movie has a good shot at being really successful. Maybe not being like a massive hit, but having some legs, maybe just being a pretty solid run throughout April and making some money. I definitely think that's within realm. But if it does really well, I think that this could be like the precursor to a full-on like Michael Jordan biopic. I think we're only like, I feel like that's got to be coming. I think that they see like the success of The Last Dance, the fact that it's been a long time since Jordan retired, and they might also be looking at it like he's definitely like in a place in his life where it might be a little bit easier to have him sort of like sign off on something. I don't know, but I mean, I could definitely see like if they could find that young actor, right, who can really channel like Michael Jordan. I mean, that's a biopic. Like we're talking like Moneybag eyes, Oscar season. Like I saw some people saying like this is like an Oscar pull, and I'm like, okay, if you would think so, I guess. Like I don't really see Oscars for this necessarily, but
I'll see. I think Amazon will push for it. I don't know if that's what they're thinking. In the broad scheme of things, I don't think they would have released this in April if that's what they were thinking.
Unless they think this could be in Everything Everywhere. That came out in April.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
didn't this also premiere at South by?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the basketball season's not happening right now, right?
So I mean, this movie's coming at the end of March Madness, so college basketball's over, and we're kind of, I think, NBA Finals. I'm not like a huge basketball person, so
I just feel like traditionally speaking, and I could be very wrong on this, but I feel like usually like when you have a sports movie, the smarter play is not to release it like during like when that sport is having a season, because like, you know, like if you like release a baseball movie during the baseball season, people are kind of like, oh, I can just like watch baseball on TV. Like I don't have to go to the movies. But like if you have a baseball movie when there's not baseball on TV, people are like, oh, baseball, I like baseball. I'll go to the movies to see baseball.
I mean, yeah, it's a good time because the NBA finals are not until June. So,
Right.
you know, there's definitely still like the playoffs and everything's going to be kind of heightened.
Right.
But I don't, you know, honestly, I don't even know if they're that honed in, whatever you want to say,
Sure.
on basketball fans. Because again, it's a lot like Moneyball in the sense that it's not really about the sport. It's also not really about the shoes, really. Like, you get a little bit of it. It is kind of interesting, I thought, to learn a little bit about like what was the rivalry like between the different shoe companies at this time. You know, we have our like Jerry Maguire character and Chris Messina. So you have, you know, I think you really do have a lot like a parallels with Jerry Maguire, because you have like the Regina Black character really mirroring, you know, the Viola Davis character there.
She has her own Show Me the Money kind of sequence, I guess.
She does.
Not in the same style, but certainly in the same cadence, I guess, in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the pluses about this movie is that it does have a really good cast. I think everybody here kind of comes into their character so well that even though not a ton happens in this movie, it doesn't have the most compelling scenes. A lot of the scenes are just characters just kind of talking in the Nike office. It's kind of chill in that sense. But I think like every character is just kind of interesting to watch. Like the Chris Messina character has like just such an interesting vibe that's like really scummy, but also an interesting like kind of quirk on that scumminess. I think the Jason Bateman character, he's a little bit more of like that voice of reason character. He's not the most fun, but he just is like so functional to the story. He's just a constant like soundboard for Matt Damon to kind of contrast the two characters. Like you can just see that I think Affleck knows how to like construct these scenes in a way where like scene to scene you're kind of moving to different energies and it's always propelling the story. Like the Chris Tucker character too. Like he kind of like contrasts the Jason Bateman character in the sense that he's a little bit more inspirational, but he's also realistic. He's also a little bit like realistic in a more practical sense. And yeah, I think it's well done there. And I mean, gosh, when we get to the point where Matt Damon is sitting with Viola Davis, I mean, it's just like magic. Movie magic.
I mean, it's not only I think the movie, like all the performances are good, and I think Affleck is good about directing actors. I think it's also just good casting. Like everyone's kind of like we talked about before, like having Ben use his history with Matt is really effective. I also think like because like Ben isn't playing Phil Knight in like the strictest sense. Like I don't think he's like completely authentic to like who Phil Knight is, but I think he's kind of having fun with the idea of like using, you know, his own like kind of like high-minded arrogance, but also like kind of like his own like maybe bouts of like pretentiousness and stuff like that, but like in like a self-aware like kind of fun way. Like the idea of just like he is really smart, he is like a good businessman, but he also is kind of like says like weird things that like people don't really understand, but they still like nod their head. Right.
He's just like Bert Cooper, down to like having the shoes off.
Right. Yeah. But yeah,
Bert Cooper is a reference to Mad Men for listeners who don't know the show.
Yeah. Be sure to listen to Mad Men wherever you get your podcasts. I think Jason Bateman is just really smartly executed here. Viola Davis obviously is always
though.
Marlon Wayans, I was going to get to him, but I was going to say Chris Tucker, I think is good. Just kind of piggyback off what you're saying, that like he is like someone who like we know is like been like the big hotshot, the fast talking money man, but like he's a little bit weathered here in a really smart, effective way. Like the idea like his glory days are kind of behind him, but he still has like that energy, that chutzpah. But like you can kind of tell like, you know, the fire's kind of going out of his eyes a little bit. He's not like in the big leagues anymore. And I think that's really smart use of Chris Tucker. But yeah, Marlon Wayans is the most interesting casting choice because it's not like the only actor here like who's giving a type of performance you don't really expect from that act.
Yeah, and I looked into this after the fact because I was like, it just seemed a little bit like, what was the full-on function of this character? It felt a little bit like what he adds to the story, like what is it? And so it turns out that it was just kind of like a request from Michael Jordan to include somebody as George Raveling, and so they had Marlon Wayans, and I think that's kind of interesting. Although, do I have that right, or was it Chris Tucker that they included as Howard White? I might actually have that wrong, so let me double fact check myself there.
I mean, I know Michael had a history with both. Like, they talk about that in the end credits.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So, I misremembered that. So, Jordan, specifically, Michael Jordan, the real Michael Jordan, requested that Howard White be included in the movie. And so, and then they cast Chris Tucker. So, sorry, it was not George Raveling.
Gotcha. Apologies. I mean, I do know that he supposedly only gave Viola Davis as a choice for his mom. Like, when they asked, like, who should play your mom, he was like, Viola Davis is the only person that could do it. So, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, but I
wonder how he feels, like watching a movie where he's like, it's interesting, right? It's like the mythos of his own self is like hovering over this movie, but like you don't really see him much. It must be so, I don't know. I could imagine that being really surreal.
I don't know. I think Michael Jordan's whole life is surreal. So it's like, I don't know, like this is probably, not that much for him. The one thing I will say is that I did think it was kind of interesting that they downplayed Michael's dad in the scheme of it. Like, I feel like because he's such a pivotal figure in Michael's life, like I was kind of like expecting like one scene where like he really factored into it, but it was mostly Viola Davis, which makes sense. But it's also kind of like, I don't know, it's just interesting to me that
I guess there might be a sense of like trying to be sensitive and try not to like make any missteps there that could like derail the whole thing, right?
I get it. I'm not saying like they have to like checker him in any sort of way. I'm just saying that like I just felt like
include him more.
Right,
I'm just saying it's probably riskier to do that.
Yeah, it just seemed like most of his role was just smiling and nodding.
Yeah, which for all we know could be pretty accurate to real life, right? The only other I have to mention Matthew Marr, who plays Peter Moore, the designer of the shoe.
Oh,
those had to be my favorite scenes of like, they're trying to get the pitch together. They're, you have the Sonny Vaccaro character coming up to him being like, I need you to make the most beautiful shoe ever made in like a day. And he's just like, okay, like it's just brilliant.
No, I don't want to spoil anything, but he has so many good like one-liners in this film. But yeah, I mean, it was also just fun to see him in a prominent role like this, coming off of Funny Pages, where he's fantastic, and he's also worked a lot with Ben Affleck. I know he's in, I think like 3 or 4 of his other directorial efforts. So like he had a long history with Ben Affleck, and I feel like this is like a nice little like, hey, like you've been my friend for a long time. You keep doing good work. Here's like a nice like prominent supporting role for you. Enjoy it.
Yeah. He was in Live by Night and Gone Baby Gone, right? And
was he also
in Jersey Girl too?
Okay, yeah, I thought he was also in either Argo or The Town, but maybe I'm misremembering.
He might be. I don't remember. But okay. I was also, I will say, well, that I didn't like. I thought it was a little weird when they went up to him and were just like, so, where are you going to build? I had a kid make this shoe for me. And I thought that was a little bit like insensitive to like, I'm just joking. That didn't happen. But I thought, I had to address that, real quick.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the movie does not really address that. So
I can understand what are we talking about, Will? What should we mention it? We're being a little cryptic.
I mean, if you want to address it, that's totally fine with me. It's more than the movie does.
Let's just say like Nike has had some certain scandals in terms of their factories and worker abuse and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, I was trying to kind of allude to that at the beginning in a more vague way, but I mean, certainly if you want to read about Nike's history, they do not have a clean past. We'll put it that way, or even a clean present. I would even argue.
And I'll be honest, I haven't really kept up with the how things have hopefully improved. This was something that it was a big thing in the 90s. So I just had to bring it up because I was like, I guess not all. A lot of our listeners probably just don't aren't old enough, or maybe not even if they were like, not really aware. But anyway, none of the shoe companies have their shoes clean. I think it would be fair to say. Anything else about Air that you wanted to address? I mean, we didn't even really like give a general sort of like opinion. I think that people can kind of read into like what we're saying, but I think we both, liked it. I think this is fun. It's a cool movie. It's definitely not like a blast, from start to finish. I'm not like shouting its praises or anything, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun watching it. It was just refreshing to see a movie like this for adults, catered towards adults. Smart, well made, competent, well acted, well executed. I feel like it's the type of movie that I'm wavering between, like, it's pretty good or good. Like, I feel like it's not like sturdy enough to be like an outright good film, but it's like better than just like pretty good. I think a lot of that just kind of comes down to the fact that it is like following a format that is like a well-worn shoe. I guess pun sort of intended there. Like, it's like, it's not really breaking the mold in any particular notable sense. It is
It fits just right, doesn't it?
Sure. I mean, it's obviously, paying a lot of homage and love to the 80s in a way that's a little grating, but it feels more like a 90s movie. Obviously, like you said, Jerry Maguire is a clear kind of point of reference for this type of film. And I feel like that's kind of key to its charm, and also what I think kind of holds it back in some respects. Like, I feel like it doesn't really like end up being more than what it is, and that's fine. I mean, I enjoy it, but I also kind of feel like it is very understandable that this is a movie made by Amazon. Like, I didn't really pay a lot of mind to that when I went into the theater, but like watching it, I was like, even though it fits well in the theater and like I'm enjoying it, I'm glad I saw it with an audience, I feel like this is a movie that's kind of made with like a streaming audience in mind, like a type of audience who are like homebound on a Sunday afternoon. They like, are on the couch, they don't want to really go anywhere, and they're flipping through Amazon Prime, and it's like, oh, Air, okay, good cast, okay, let's see this. I feel like that's like the target audience for this movie, and that's fine. It's cool. I also kind of feel like it doesn't match like the prestige of like Ben Affleck's previous 3 directorial features, but at the same time, certainly better than the Live by Night.
Yeah, and I think the key there is that it's not trying to be that prestigious sort of thing. Which is why I was kind of confused that people were sort of like trying to read that into this movie's prospects as like, this is a prestigious award-winning film. I don't get the sense that it's even really angling for that necessarily, more than any other film might. It just kind of is a movie that I think is operating off of, like you said, a pretty well-known formula. It's not trying to deviate for the sake of it. It's not trying to be over the top and what it's after. It's just kind of, it is what it is. It's yeah.
I mean, it is part of, like, I think Ben Affleck's, like, whatever, like, 70th comeback, in the sense of, like, he's, he had,
people
like,
are still saying that?
Well, I mean, in the sense of, like, I think now he's, like, pretty firmly back, still memeable as ever, but, like, I feel like, like, after, like, the whole Justice League debacle, and, like, him kind of going back into, like, his alcoholism, and then, like, his, like, marriage falling apart, but then now he's, like, back with J-Lo, he seems to be kind of, much more fit, seems to be a lot more healthier, and it seems to be, healthy
he's
and
like
sober.
a bit of a spark in his eye, like he's kind of like looking right at us now. Like
right.
Before, it was like he had that like kind of vacant expression.
Yeah,
like he just really didn't want to be in movies in these like press junkets. Yeah,
especially off of like the press junket for Batman v Superman.
Yeah,
but
Justice League.
Yeah. I mean, well, the Justice League experience, I feel like, wasn't especially fun for him. But yeah, no, I mean, it seems like he's firmly kind of like on his feet again. Like, I feel like this movie is pretty nimble in his execution. Like, I don't feel it's like him taking like a big swing, but like I feel like it's him like just kind of like reestablishing himself, just kind of proving himself once more, working in his element well. And yeah, I mean, it's a fun, breezy piece of entertainment.
I have to agree with you there. And, it's going to be out in theaters this weekend. I expect it'll do well. I mean, the problem it faces is not that it's not a movie that people will come out to see. It's just that the competition is fierce right now.
Sure.
I think, Super Mario, obviously, but we still have John Wick in theaters. We still have Scream. We still have Cocaine Bear, apparently. I thought Cocaine Bear was out.
Nope. It's actually it's already in theaters. It came out Wednesday, same day as
oh, that's true. Yeah.
Super Mario Brothers, because of the holiday weekend.
Right. So it's on a 5-day weekend. It's made $3.3 million so far. So we don't really have a picture yet, though, of how it's going to do because of that, like how that's going to spread out and how it's going to do over the next few days. But happy we were able to talk about it now because, I do think that some people are going to be watching and are going to be kind of curious of what critics think. But on that note, Will, we should play the Rotten Tomatoes game. And I think you've already kind of gotten some, you've seen the score at some point, right? So it might be different, might be the same.
I actually didn't see the score. I don't think I was told the score by my friend. My friend Dan, I think, informed me of the score. But I just
imagine you and Dan were at the YMCA shooting hoops, and he was just like,
I wish. Yeah.
Speaking of...
But no, I mean, I think I had heard someone on Twitter like say it initially. So it wasn't like I had heard kind of like the idea of like what it was, because I knew initially at South by Southwest it had like 100% when it premiered there at the end of the festival.
Yes,
and then from what I've been told, it's kind of stayed there, but not at 100% exactly, but like it went to like 99%. And I imagine by now it's probably dipped a little bit, but I don't think it's like, outside of the like top 90 percentile. So I'm going to say...
Well, hold on. I haven't told you how many reviews have been counted. Okay. That's important, right? 155. So I don't know if that shapes anything at all, but some context for people listening.
I'm going to go and say... I'm going to go a little bit lower just because I feel like, there more reviews are coming out. So maybe some more people talking smack about the movie's capitalistic efforts and it's kind of formulaic structure, whatever, but still I think it's a hard movie to dislike, I think, broadly speaking. So I'm gonna say 97%.
I said 97. However, you are off by 2.
Okay, so it is still 99%.
I was about to ask, you think 95 or 99, but no, it's 95%.
Oh, okay, so it did go down, but more than I thought.
Yeah, it's been steadily dropping, and it might continue for all we know, because we probably still have another 100 reviews or so to hit Rotten Tomatoes for this one. We'll see though. But for audience score, we have 250 plus verified ratings. We kind of have like an initial wave, people who've caught this one already. What do you think?
I imagine audiences are going to be digging it. I don't know if it's as high as the critic score, but I'm going to say 93%.
Ooh, a bit higher.
Okay.
It's higher than 93%. Give you one more guess.
Is it 98%?
Yes, it is 98%.
Oh, cool.
Good guess. Yeah, you had a 1 in 6 shot. Yeah.
Just like Matt Damon, I had all in the line and I just went for it. So there you go.
I like the decisiveness too. You were just like, well, if it's not 93, I know what it is.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm inspired by the movie's, chutzpah, and it's like forwardness. We do already have a cinema score. I actually didn't think we would, but we do. What do you think it is? A-.
It is an A. A bit higher. You keep underestimating this movie, Will.
No, I mean, I overestimated it for the critics.
Yeah, it's because of the first one. The first one has like scarred you, apparently. Okay, last we have Letterboxd, our favorite app of choice for movies. I shouldn't say yours, it's mine. But okay, 11,000 watches on Letterboxd. Not a lot. So we don't really have, I think, like a really decent picture of how this will go over on Letterboxd, because it's like pretty low so far. But no, give your best guess. Average rating.
I'm going to say 4.1.
A bit lower. You overestimated again. I spoke too soon, huh? 3.8.
Okay.
A little bit lower.
Makes sense.
Good guess, score, considering. Yeah. But yeah, we have friends of the show who were all about this one. I'm seeing like Matt Donato gave it 3.5. Aaron Dicer gave it 4. Isaac Feldberg gave it 2.5. But you know him; he loves to have fun. And Kimber
have
Myers
fun by not liking a movie.
Yeah, he likes to spice things up. That's why we love him. Kimber Myers gave it 4.5. She's a big fan.
Yeah.
So
Amanda the Jedi gave it 3.5.
Man of the Jedi, yeah. So that is Air. It is going to be out in theaters this weekend. We will be back to talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie later on, and plenty of other things coming down the pipeline. So thank you as always for listening. We'll see you on the next one. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
Shoot some hoops with you next time.